A very good afternoon. Welcome to the briefing here on GB News. It is 3 p.m. I'm Darren McCaffrey, live in Westminster on another dramatic day in British politics, a day in which it saw a Conservative MP quit to cross the House and join the Labour Party, a day in which David Davis, the former Brexit Secretary, told the Prime Minister it was time to go, but a day in which Boris Johnson came out fighting at PMQs, insisting that everyone needed to wait for Sue Gray's report, most likely next week. We'll be mopping up all the latest political news and analysis between 3 and 4 o'clock. We'll also be looking at a significant announcement from the government as it plans to scrap all Plan B measures next week, another sign that England will be returning to life as normal. As always, get in touch with your views. How do you feel about politics at the moment? Do you want to see Boris stay or go? You can email us at gbviews@gbnews.uk, or you can tweet us at GBNews. But at the top of the hour, before all that, it's the latest news with Rosie Wright.
Good afternoon. It is 2 minutes past 3. You're with me, Rosie Wright, to get you up to date here on GB News. England's coronavirus Plan B restrictions will be lifted next week. Boris Johnson confirmed face masks will no longer be mandatory in classrooms from tomorrow. They're also not going to be required in public places either from next Thursday. The guidance to work from home and mandatory COVID passes are also being scrapped. And from March the 24th, there will no longer be a requirement to isolate if you test positive for coronavirus. The Labour leader, Sir Keir Starmer, has welcomed the MP for Bury South after he defected from the Conservative Party. Christian Wakeford says he can't support a government that's shown itself to be consistently out of touch with the country. The Prime Minister claims his party will regain the seat at the next election. Speaking on GB News, Conservative MP Michael Fabricant called on the new Labour MP to call a by-election.
Well, I have to laugh, by the way, about Christian Wakeford, who has defected across the Labour because he was a co-sponsor of a bill in Parliament which said that if anyone crosses the floor of the House, they should call an immediate by-election.
Is that right?
So I challenge Christian Wakeford. That's what you were saying only a few months ago. Will you now call that by-election that you wanted to make law in your bill? We'll see whether he's a hypocrite or not.
Meanwhile, when asked, Boris Johnson has told the Commons he won't resign. The Prime Minister faces the threat of a growing number of letters of no confidence from within his own party. If 54 Conservative MPs submit letters of no confidence, that would trigger a leadership contest for the party. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer insists the Downing Street party fallout means the Prime Minister's now too distracted.
While Labour was setting out plans to heat homes, he was buying a fridge to keep the party wine chilled. While we were setting out plans to keep bills down, he was planning parties. And while we were setting out plans to save jobs in the steel industry, he was trying to save just one job, his own.
But Boris Johnson believes his government achieved more during the pandemic than any European country.
When the history of this pandemic comes to be written, and the history of the Labour Party comes to be written, and believe me, they are history and will remain history, Mr. Speaker, it will show that we delivered while they dithered, and we vaccinated while they vacillated, Mr. Speaker.
Now, in other news, the cost of living has risen at its fastest pace in 30 years as inflation rose to 5.4% in December. That's up from 5.1% the month before. The price of food, non-alcoholic drinks, hospitality and clothing went up in the last month. That rise was partially offset by declining prices of transport and recreation. A second man has been arrested in Ireland on suspicion of withholding information in connection with the murder of Aisling Murphy. The schoolteacher was killed near a canal in Tullamore last Wednesday. The man arrested yesterday on suspicion of murder remains in custody. UK crime-fighting groups have travelled to Spain to track down the 12 most wanted fugitives. The National Crime Agency and crime-fighting charity Crime Stoppers are launching an international campaign to find the offenders, all of whom have connections with Spain or the Canary Islands. Well, GB News Home and Security Editor Mark White is in Madrid with NCA officers. He says the dozen of them on the run, all men, are wanted for crimes including murder, drugs and weapons trafficking.
Well, this is a major campaign right across Spain and, of course, in the UK, where these 12 most wanted fugitives are a mix of murder suspects, drug traffickers and gun runners. The National Crime Agency say that by now it's likely that those fugitives will have tried to integrate into the British expat communities across Spain.
Yorkshire County Cricket Club have appointed Otis Gibson as their new head coach on a 3-year deal. The 52-year-old is the latest addition to the coaching team at Headingley, following the departures of 16 staff members last month. It follows allegations of racial abuse and bullying raised by the former player Azeem Rafiq. You are up to date now on GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens. Now back to the briefing.
Hello and welcome back to the briefing on GB News. It is 6 minutes past 3 o'clock. What another interesting, fascinating, dramatic day in British politics. Boris Johnson in a pretty bullish mood at Prime Minister's Question Time today in an attempt, a very deliberate attempt to change strategy. No apologies today, rather a continued drumming of what the government have achieved over the last the success of what the government have achieved over the last couple of years. But we saw a defection and, of course, we saw David Davis, the Brexit Secretary, essentially lay into the Prime Minister, saying that now was the time to go. And all this, of course, while speculation continues about just how many letters have now been submitted to the 1922 committee to Sir Graham Brady, and whether that number will be reached. Has the Prime Minister potentially, has even that defection bought Boris Johnson a little bit more time? We're not now expecting, we think, that report from Sue Gray, the senior civil servant investigating claims of parties in Downing Street, until next week. We're going to bring you the highlights from what happened at PMQs in just a couple of minutes. As always, get in touch, gbviews at gbnews.uk. Very keen to hear what you've got to say, but delighted to say that joining me now outside Parliament to get their insight is Chris Hope from The Telegraph and Dan Hodges from The Mail on Sunday. Very good afternoon to both of you, gentlemen. Chris, let's start with you. Just your assessment of Prime Minister's Question Time. It was quite messy, wasn't it? Keir Starmer didn't kind of land as many punches as people may have thought, or he's done in the past. But what was your thoughts?
He looked comfortable, I thought, Keir Starmer. He's invited other MPs to join him from across the divide. I thought, I think this kind of news from Christian Wakeford today, which did certainly shock Parliament, is only going to unite the Tory party more with Boris Johnson. I think it has bought him some more time. The Sue Gray report's out next week. David Davis is, in the name of God, go jive to Boris Johnson, really knocked the wind out of him. You almost see him being winded physically at the dispatch box. I mean, no one was expecting that at all. So now DD's back in the game as a kind of kingmaker if Boris Johnson goes somewhere. I personally think that if there's no confidence vote, it could be an opportunity to reset the whole administration. I think Boris Johnson needs a wake-up call to get a grip both on his party, his MPs, and number 10, because currently he hasn't got it.
Lots to unpick there. Dan, first of all, on the defection, I take Chris's point. Your politics might play as it does here, that it might unite the Tory party, but a defection is still a sign of weakness, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, Chris is right. I mean, I think, we were looking at a situation where it was conceivable we would have had all the letters in by 5 p.m. today. One sort of rebel told me, but I think the Wakeford defection, as Chris said, has set that back at least until next week. But no, you're absolutely right. I mean, we've got to understand what happened today. I mean, a Tory MP, a sitting Tory MP in a relatively marginal seat, just sort of came across to Keir Starmer's Labour Party. Now, obviously, that would have been unthinkable under Jeremy Corbyn's leadership.
Maybe unthinkable 6 months ago.
Oh, 6 months ago, indeed. And a lot of the people are fanning out, attacking Wakeford, calling him ambitious. He's looking after himself. Well, that's the problem. That's the political problem for Boris now, because somebody who is ambitious, clearly like Christian Wakeford is, thinks his political fortunes are best served by serving under Keir Starmer than under Boris Johnson. And I think that tells you about a lot about the strategic problem that Boris now faces, and more broadly the Conservative Party faces.
And indeed, we had a poll out today suggesting support in that red wall, the so-called red wall, has slumped potentially, that the Conservatives only hold on to 3 out of the 45 seats there. How much is that playing on the MPs that you talk to?
This isn't just a red wall situation. The 2019 intake comes from across the country, facing Lib Dems, Labour, and regionally everywhere, and that's what has been forgotten, I think, in all this. The whips, I think, were quite blindsided by this. I think did
they make it worse?
Arguably, some of the bully boy tactics of the whips have made it worse. Certainly, I gather Wakeford was threatened with losing his seat at the next election. It may be a threat to it under the boundary changes due in July 2023. So I think it hasn't helped. I think some of these MPs, let's not feel too sorry for them because they're paid and pay good wages to do what they do, but they haven't really had a good time of the lockdown. They've become MPs, many not expecting to become MPs because of the red wall victories, and no one's really said to them, here's how you do the job. They've really been dropped into it, and they're trying to work out who their friends are, and that's why they've kind of coalesced around, is Boris Johnson the answer? The warning for the Tories is they are rubbish in opposition. They hate it. They want to be in power. Labour's more suited to opposition because they like discussing ideas and ranting about debates, but I think that's what I would say. The concern for Tories is don't get into opposition if you're them.
In saying that, we had Anne Whitcomb on this morning talking about how the Conservative Party was a rabble and they were idiots, the people submitting letters. Was it, or is it even still, not necessarily a great move to submit those letters before Sue Gray has reported? Because you could have a leadership challenge to a Prime Minister where, frankly, there is no official report into what may well have happened.
I think what you're seeing, I think it's just a reflection of what Tory MPs are now getting in their post bags and getting on the doorsteps. I mean, we went away last weekend and we thought, well, we'll just have to wait for the Sue Gray report and see how this plays out. But what we saw quite clearly is MPs went away over the weekend and they were some of them were quite frankly shocked about the scale of the reaction. You mentioned the red wall poll. Remember, we had a poll in the Mail on Sunday 2 or 3 weeks ago which showed a collapse in red wall seats. That predated what we've just seen. And I think the key thing from today is I think Boris has bought himself a little bit more time. But you touched on the David Davis intervention as well. Now we've got a situation here where we see red wall MPs putting in letters. We've seen David Davis, one of the Tory grandees, one of the architects of Brexit. He stood up and asked for the Prime Minister to go. The Spartans are on manoeuvres. It's the breadth of opposition that Boris is now facing. Under Theresa May, it was quite binary. It was Brexiteers against Remainers. This is across the breadth of the Conservative Party now, and I think that's the real problem for Boris.
I see memories of IDS 2003. It's the party MPs, they are unhappy with the leader. They may be going ahead of where the membership is, but they want to get somebody who's electable in next election 2020,
just following on this, Chris, but Boris Johnson's not IDS. He is the kind of political comeback kids, as in, he's come back from many political perceived crises in the past. And there's a lot of people out there who still quite like him. There's a lot of MPs who still quite like him. They quite liked his kind of more bullish approach today. I think you've got a sense of that in the chamber. I mean, is there a pathway through for him here?
Well, there is, but why has he been hiding? Why is it that we only ever see him on GBNews and other stations when he's being snapped or grabbed at a hospital or school, and it's like he's being hunted and they've found him, quickly interview him for 10 minutes, then he disappears again? Why not let Boris be Boris? Why can't he go out there and start doing Q&As with weekly Q&As with members and take the questions, take the hits? Cameron did it, ask questions to Dave, went down really well. I think that might be an idea they might be looking to do once they get past, maybe past this drama before the next one.
Well, we'll see. OK, gentlemen, we're going to pause there for the time being. Let's bring you some of the highlights from Prime Minister's Question Time. A hell of a lot going on. Enjoy. This is some of the best bits from PMQs a little earlier.
Can I start by warmly welcoming the Honourable Member for Bury South to his new place and to the Parliamentary Labour Party. Mr. Speaker, like so many people up and down the country, he has concluded that the Prime Minister and the Conservative Party have shown themselves incapable of offering the leadership and government this country deserves, whereas the Labour Party stands ready to provide an alternative government that the country can be proud of. Mr. Speaker, the Labour Party has changed, and so has the Conservative Party. He and anyone else who wants to build a new Britain built on decency, security, prosperity and respect is welcome in my Labour Party. Every week, the Prime Minister offers absurd and frankly unbelievable defences to the Downing Street parties, and each week it unravels.
I've been elected the chair. I don't need to be told how to conduct the business. So if somebody wants to do some direction, I'll start directing them out of the chamber. Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, I see the very noise. I'm sure the Chief Whip has told them to bring their own booze.
Order. Let's try and get on with questions. It's going to be a long day if not. Keir Starmer.
Mr. Speaker, first he said there were no parties. Then the video landed, blowing that defence out the water. Next he said he was sicker than furious when he found out about the parties, until it turned out that he himself was at the Downing Street garden party. Then last week he said he didn't realise he was at a party, and surprise, surprise, no one believed him. So this week he's got a new defence. Nobody warned me that it was against the rules. That's it. Nobody told him. Since the Prime Minister wrote the rules, why on earth does he think that his new defence is going to work for him?
Of course, Mr. Speaker, we must wait for the outcome of the inquiry. But I renew what I've said, Mr. Speaker. But when it comes to his view,
Nobody believes what you say. Can we have a little less? I want to this Prime Minister like I wanted to leader of the opposition. I want the same courtesy from both sides. Prime Minister.
Yeah. Well, Mr. Speaker, if we'd listened to the right honourable gentleman about COVID restrictions, which is the substance of his question, then, Mr. Speaker, we would still be, we would have been in lockdown after July. If this is the truth, if we listened to the Labour front bench in the run-up to Christmas and New Year, Mr. Speaker, we would have stayed in restrictions with huge damage to the economy. And it's because of the judgments that I've taken and that we have taken in Downing Street that we now have the fastest growing economy in the G7 and GDP, Mr. Speaker, now back up above pre-pandemic levels. And as for Bury South, Mr. Speaker, as for Bury South, let me say to the right gentleman, Mr. Speaker, by all leave, may I say to the right honourable gentleman that the Conservative Party won Bury South for the first time in generations under this Prime Minister, with an agenda of uniting and levelling up and delivering for the people of Bury South. And, Mr. Speaker, we will win again in Bury South at the next election.
Not only did he write the rules, but some of his staff say they did warn him about attending the party on the 20th of May 2020. Now, I've heard the Prime Minister's very carefully crafted response to that accusation. It almost sounds like a lawyer wrote it. So I'll be equally careful with my question. When did the Prime Minister first become aware that any of his staff had concerns about the 20th of May party?
Speaker, it is for the inquiry to come forward with an explanation of what happened, and I'm afraid he simply must wait. But he asks about my staff, Mr. Speaker. He asks about my staff and what my staff are doing and what they have told me. And I can tell him, Mr. Speaker, that they have taken decisions throughout this pandemic that he has opposed to open up in July, Mr. Speaker, as I have said, to mount the fastest vaccine rollout in Europe, and Mr. Speaker, to double the speed of the booster rollout, with the result that we have the most open economy in Europe, Mr. Speaker.
Extraordinary with each version of his defence. If the Prime Minister's new defence were true, it requires him to suggest that his staff are not being truthful when they say they warned him about the party. It requires the Prime Minister to expect us to believe that whilst every other person who was invited on the 20th of May to the party was told it was a social occasion, he alone was told it was a work meeting. It also requires the Prime Minister to ask us to accept that as he waded through the empty bottles and platters of sandwiches, he didn't realise it was a party. Does the Prime Minister realise how ridiculous that sounds?
Mr. Speaker, I've said what I've said about the events in Number 10. He will have to wait for the report. And Mr. Speaker, I think he asks for further clarification. I think there are lots of people who are interested. I say this entirely in passing, Mr. Speaker. Lots of people are interested in the exact legal justification from the learned leader of the opposition for the picture of him drinking a pint of beer or a bottle of beer.
That was Prime Minister's Question Time a little earlier in the Commons. Another really interesting one which I felt Boris Johnson's change of tactic, which was essentially be more bullish, seemed to work to a degree, though that was somewhat blown out of the water, wasn't it, by David Davis's statement. Question essentially saying now was the time to go. Lots of you getting in touch. Elizabeth says the idea of defecting is completely wrong. If this MP now stands for Labour values, he would trigger a by-election and let his constituents decide. Pauline says, I think Sir Keir is treating Parliament like a circus and he's wasted every question today. Stephen says David Davis made his move too soon. He should have waited to see if a vote of no confidence is triggered first. Get in touch, gbviews@gbnews.uk, and we'll get to those a little later in the programme. We're going to pause there. We're live in Westminster. It's just after 3:20. You're watching GB News on TV, on radio and online. Coming up next, we'll be speaking to the Labour Party and the Lib Dems, mopping up all the latest political reaction. See you in just a couple of minutes.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
My name is Andrew Doyle. Join me every Sunday evening at 7 p.m. for Free Speech Nation. This is a show where we address current affairs and news stories of the week with the help of two wonderful comedian panellists. I brought in comics because I want to give it a lighter edge, and also they work for less. See you there.
Join me, Mark White, here on GB News. For more than 2 decades, I've been at the sharp end of reporting crime and security at home and abroad. From the scourge of terrorism to the fight against violent crime and the deepening small boats crisis in the Channel, they're issues you rightly care about, and so do I. As GB News Home and Security Editor, my focus will be on the stories that matter to you.
Welcome back to the briefing here on GB News, live from Westminster, 25 minutes past 3 o'clock. Thank you for your company on this Wednesday afternoon. We're back outside Parliament on another dramatic day in British politics. Let's get the reaction now of the Labour opposition. So, like I say, I'm joined by Ellie Reeves, who's the Shadow Justice Secretary, and joining me outside Parliament. Ellie, thank you very much indeed for joining us. First of all, just in terms of all the controversies and the allegations and the questions today, the Prime Minister's riposte was, well, we have to wait for Sue Gray's report. And that's a fair place to be, isn't it? That's where these questions in many ways should be answered.
Well, you know, he said time and again, let's wait for the report. But the reality is that the Prime Minister is the only one that can answer whether he has misled Parliament. He has said, first of all, that there wasn't a party, and then that there was a party, but no rules had been broken. First, we weren't sure if he was at the party or not. Then he said he was at the party, and then he said if any rules were broken, he didn't know because he didn't know what the rules are. I mean, you know, the Prime Minister has had quite a lot to say about these parties, and it changes from week to week. And I think the public deserve to know what the reality is here. People are feeling let down.
Yeah, that may well be the case, but the whole point is we know that these answers are going to be answered in this report. It's almost certainly going to come out next week. You know, many people feel that today the questions from Keir Starmer were slightly wasted. Inflation is running another 30-year high. People are feeling the cost of living crisis. Would it be better to ask the Prime Minister about that, or COVID restrictions?
Well, I think people made huge sacrifices during lockdowns. People weren't able to see dying loved ones, mothers being left to give birth alone, people not being able to see family members, being isolated, feeling lonely. And actually, you know, the news that whilst they were doing that, whilst they were making those sacrifices because they believed it was important to keep the virus under control and to save lives, number 10 were having parties. So I think it's absolutely right that we do question the Prime Minister about this and his role in the parties, and only he can answer for that.
No, but you get my point that, you know, there is a lot of things affecting a lot of people. Prime Minister's Question Time has been dominated now for weeks about this party issue. Clearly it is an important issue, but at the same time there's a hell of a lot else happening. Yeah. And why is Labour not focusing on that?
Well, I mean, that's why just the other week we brought a motion to the House in relation to rising energy costs. This is an issue that is hugely affecting families up and down the country, and under Labour we would cut VAT on household energy bills, saving households £200 a year, and those most in need up to £600 a year. And we brought that motion to the House. We want to debate these important issues. In fact, the government, the Conservatives, voted against that motion. We're trying to put these issues on the agenda, and actually, you know, the fact is, even Conservative MPs now are looking at this Prime Minister and seeing that having him as leader is a distraction from these very, very serious issues that are facing our country that needs tackling. It's Labour the ones with the ideas to tackle it.
No, I'm sure you're going to welcome Christian Wakefield's to the Labour Party. In saying that, you know, if you go on his social media, I'm sure the interviews he's given in the past, he's been pretty damning of the Labour Party, talking about how he's neglected Bury, how essentially he's pleased to have kicked the party out. I think he's attacked Keir Starmer in the past. I mean, it's not pretty uncomfortable. He's attacked the licence fee, he supported the police bill when it comes to protests. This man's been a Conservative who's voted for all the things that you dislike about this government.
Well, I think that the fact that a Conservative Member of Parliament has crossed the House today and joined Labour is something that we certainly welcome. And I think it says a lot about where the Conservative Party are now, and the fact that people see Labour as a credible alternative to the current government. You know, we are the ones that are talking about the cost of living crisis and how we will tackle it. We're talking about security and how we can keep our communities safe. We're talking about...
Should there be a by-election at least, though? I mean, if that's such a good policy platform to stand on, he's defected. Apparently he supported this in the past. Surely that should be put to the people of Bury.
Well, look, you know, I think that what's happened today should be welcomed. Those discussions can take place on another day, but I think we need to just, you know, reflect on the fact that a Conservative Member of Parliament is so sick of what is going on in the Conservative Party that he has now joined the Labour benches.
OK, Ellie Reeves, thank you very much indeed. And apparently I promoted you a little earlier.
You did,
Cabinet Justice Minister, not Secretary.
That's right.
But you never know, you never know. Politics is a fluid game, Ellie. Thank you very much indeed for joining us. OK, you're watching GB News. We're live outside Westminster. Much more political reaction to another dramatic day in politics. But first, before all of that, let's bring you up to date with the latest news. Head back to the studio and to Rosie Wright.
Thanks, Darren. It is 3:30. Let's get you up to date with the latest headlines. So England's coronavirus Plan B restrictions will be lifted from next week. The Prime Minister confirmed face masks will no longer be mandatory in classrooms from tomorrow. From next Thursday, they won't be required in public places either. The guidance to work from home and mandatory COVID passes are also being scrapped. Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer has welcomed the MP for Bury South after he defected from the Conservative Party. Christian Wakeford says he can't support a government that's shown itself to be consistently out of touch with the country. The Prime Minister claims his party will regain the seat at the next general election. Meanwhile, in response to questioning in the Commons, Boris Johnson said he won't resign. The Prime Minister's facing the threat of a vote of no confidence from within his own party. It will be triggered if 54 letters are submitted by Conservative MPs to Sir Graham Brady, the chairman of the 1922 committee. In other news now, the cost of living has risen at its fastest pace in 30 years as inflation rose to 5.4% in December. That's up 5.1% from what it was in November. The price of food, non-alcoholic drinks, hospitality and clothing all went up. UK crime-fighting groups have travelled to Spain to track down the 12 most wanted fugitives. The National Crime Agency is launching an international campaign to find the offenders who have connections with Spain or the Canary Islands. The dozen on the run, all men, are wanted for crimes including murder, drugs and weapons trafficking. Yorkshire County Cricket Club have appointed Otis Gibson as their new head coach on a 3-year deal. The 52-year-old is the latest addition at Headingley, following the departures of 16 staff members last month. It follows allegations of racial abuse and bullying raised by the former player Azim Rafiq. You are now up to date here on GB News. We're on your TV, online and DAB Plus radio. After the break, we'll be back with Darren and the briefing.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview Channel 236.
On Sky, we're Channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
I'm Dan Wootton. Join me Monday to Thursday from 9 to 11 for the feistiest and most fun news debate on TV, where free speech reigns. I'll bring you a sharp take on the day's biggest stories, bombshell newsmaker interviews, and A-list guests. And I guarantee you, no spin, no bias, no censorship, and no reason to go to bed. That's Dan Wootton tonight, Monday to Thursdays from 9 on GB News.
Hello there, I'm Eamon Holmes.
And I'm Isabel Webster.
And we hope you can join us for
Breakfast with Eamon
and Isabel.
You make me laugh out loud, belly laugh.
Is that important first thing in the morning?
Yeah, absolutely.
And there's me trying to be deadly serious. News is a serious business.
Yeah, I have to rein you in sometimes.
Well, it doesn't stop us laughing at it. It doesn't stop us having an opinion on what's going on.
Yeah.
And it certainly will not stop us reflecting what you think.
Weekdays from 6 to 9:30 on GB News.
Welcome back to the briefing here on GB News, on TV, on radio and online. It is 25 minutes to 4 o'clock. Now, in the last hour or so, the Prime Minister's spokesperson making it clear that Boris Johnson would fight any confidence motion if one were to be called. Perhaps unsurprising, that situation. Of course, we've not got to that figure of 54 letters that need to be submitted to Sir Graham Brady and the 1922 committee to trigger a leadership election. In fact, actually, a ex-minister, a former cabinet minister, this afternoon suggesting that that defection that we saw just ahead of Prime Minister's question time from Bury South, Conservative MP switching to Labour, might have actually provided an alternative target for the rage, and that it somewhat helped calm the mood within the Conservative Party. Let's get a view, though, of the Liberal Democrats. Alistair Carmichael is outside Parliament with me. Alistair, thank you very much indeed for joining us. I was putting this to Ellie Reeves a little bit earlier on, and I do it again because, you know, the Prime Minister repeatedly said today we have to wait for Sue Gray's report, and in that he's got a valid point. You know, we can ask all the questions in the world, but she is there to answer them, isn't she?
He is hiding behind the Sue Gray report now, and you know, Sue Gray has a fairly limited remit, as you would expect, as a full-time permanent senior civil servant, and really the questions that my constituents and people right across the country want answered are questions that are never going to be answered by Sue Gray. They're questions that were answered by Boris Johnson already. You know, the fact that he said that there were no parties, and then he said that there were, and then he said that he didn't know about them, and suddenly he didn't know that they were. You know, the story keeps changing in this way, and that just undermines his credibility. Sue Gray is not going to look at that. So, you know, whatever you see when you see Sue Gray's report, and it will still be significant, because for the first time I think you will have every step of the sorry saga laid out in glorious technicolor. And I think at that point the Conservative MPs have got to exercise their own judgment and lance the spoil, because this isn't going to go away for the Prime Minister.
What would you say to those people watching this programme? We say, you know what, I'm sick to death of hearing about this. I don't really care about these parties. You know, we should be talking about other things. Inflation's at a 30-year high today. Cost of living's going up for everyone. Why are you and everyone else banging on about these parties?
I think I have a lot of sympathy for that, because, you know, our economy has got massive challenges at the moment. Inflation at 5.4%, as you try and take these businesses out of hibernation that have been effectively just ticking over throughout the COVID pandemic. You know, there are going to be real challenges. But that's actually why it's important that you have a Prime Minister who has got moral and political authority, because the government, whoever is in government, is going to have to do some pretty difficult stuff. And Boris Johnson now no longer has that authority. And, you know, for as long as he remains at the top of this government, it is going to struggle. And, you know, look, I'm not a Conservative. I've never been a Conservative. I will never be a Conservative. But I just, you know, I want the government of my country to be able to do what needs to be done in the national interest, and that's not what we've got now.
Just in terms of other issues today, big significant announcement on Plan B being rolled back when it comes to COVID restrictions. Welcome news from your point of view?
There are big chunks of Plan B that should never have been in there in the first place. The vaccine passports, for example, the compulsory vaccination for NHS workers, we oppose that. You know, we'll see what the detail is of that when we get it. There are perhaps going to be some public health measures that will continue to be sensible, wearing of masks in public transport and that sort of thing going forward. But yeah, you know, the crux though, this again comes back to the position of the Prime Minister. The government of the day should be introducing or relaxing restrictions according to the evidence and the advice they're given, not just something that the Prime Minister has to do to secure his own position.
Do you think then that Mark Drayford, Nicola Sturgeon, the Northern Ireland executive, they've all made mistakes then?
I think they certainly, in relation to the introduction of vaccine passports, you can see that they've had absolutely no beneficial effect, and in fact they have been a major restriction on people's liberties. They have been very divisive in their application, and yes, I think, you know, that shows quite clearly that that was a mistake.
Okay, Alistair Carmichael, thank you very much indeed. Liberal Democrat there joining us outside Parliament. Now, we talked a little earlier, didn't we, about that dramatic moment when David Davis essentially dropped a bombshell in Prime Minister's question time, calling on the Prime Minister to go. Let's just remind us of that very moment.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Like many on these benches, I spent weeks and months defending the Prime Minister against often angry constituents. I reminded them of his success in delivering Brexit and on the vaccine and many other things. But I expect my leaders to shoulder the responsibility for the actions they take. Yesterday, he did the opposite of that. So I'll remind him of a quotation altogether too familiar to him of Leo Amery to Neville Chamberlain. You have sat there too long for all the good you have done. In the name of God, go.
Must be said, Boris Johnson was slightly taken aback by all of that, didn't really have an answer to David Davis, and it came after a Prime Minister's Question Time in which I think many of his backbenchers thought he'd done a better job than he had certainly last week, but a reminder of just how febrile, I suppose, the atmosphere here is at Westminster, that many MPs still trying to make that judgment call about whether they are prepared to back the Prime Minister Boris Johnson. Lots of you still getting in touch. Julia says that Labour voters are not stupid. I can't see them rushing to vote for someone who's defected to the Tories. Helen says, I think Boris ditching Plan B, and we were talking about that just now, that those COVID restrictions are going to be lifted from next Thursday, is a good thing, but I can't help but wonder whether he's doing this now just in a bid to keep his job, many suggesting it's convenient timing, though the government, of course, are saying when you look at the data that things really have changed, with cases now falling right across the United Kingdom. Of course, those plans, though, to Plan B only apply to England's. Other measures have been announced, the reduction in Scotland and Wales in recent days. Well, it's back to the politics and back to where the Prime Minister stands on this Wednesday afternoon. Let's talk to Claire Purcell, who is a former Tory and now a councillor. Claire, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Just give me your overall assessment of where you do think we stand now in terms of Boris Johnson's leadership. It feels like we're on a rollercoaster ride.
It does, and I feel this is a bit of the lull before the storm. So yesterday was not great. Today his performance has been better, and I think largely been saved by a defection over to Labour. But I worry that tomorrow this will ramp up again and we'll see more revelations and more problems.
Do you think that people like Dominic Cummings and others may well have kind of further evidence of other parties or more information about the ones that we've already heard of?
I don't like Dominic Cummings, I've made no secret of that, but he is extremely clever, and I think if there is more to come out, he will have it, and it will drip out at a time that is convenient for him.
So in terms of the Conservative backbenchers, we heard just now from David Davis, of course the former Brexit Secretary. What's your thoughts in terms of how damaging that potentially is for the Prime Minister? I heard a certain minister today suggesting that he's a bit of a dinosaur and no one really takes any notice of him.
I think that's quite unfair. David Davis has been around a while, but he's also a leading Brexiteer, so it does take down the argument that this is a Remainer plot to remove the Prime Minister, when you have the chief of the Brexit ERG groups coming together and saying that this is enough and it has to end.
What happens then next? We know Sue Gray's report is not going to come until probably next week, the Prime Minister stated earlier. That will be a real moment of focus, isn't it, for lots of Conservative MPs? That's kind of decision time.
It is. I think we've all been hiding behind the Sue Gray report, and there is merit to that. We do have to see the detail, but I think that will make people have much more of an opinion as to where it is they stand. There will be some who are quiet at the moment, who are just waiting for that, and then will give their position quite clearly.
Why do you think people want to move against Boris Johnson? Is it they simply just don't believe him, they don't like where the government is going, or they simply think public opinion is turning against him? Why are now probably frankly dozens of MPs want to see him go?
I think it's been a shambolic communications exercise from Number 10, and that is now reaching out onto the doorsteps of the constituencies. So when members of Parliament went back to their constituencies on Friday and over the weekend, they are going to have seen the mood of their public change. So I think that is really, really important. It's not been handled well. He's not coming out of it good.
Can he survive? Is there a path for him? You know, people have written off Boris Johnson many times before. He's come through. Can Boris Johnson get through this?
I don't think so. I think he's now fatally wounded. You've seen some bad media performances, more revelations, and a Prime Minister who admitted that he didn't know what the rules were, and these were the rules that he made.
So if he's gone, big question is who replaces him? Because there is no obvious successor, and that's why some people suggest he might be able to hold on, because unlike with Theresa May, where he was the obvious successor, that isn't the case this time.
It's not, and we have to wait and see who puts their name forward. And, you know, names are going around Westminster Village like anybody's business, and you have the likes of Liz Truss and Penny Mordaunt, but also Nadhim Zahawi and Tom Tugendhat. So I think it'll be very interesting to see who actually puts their name forward.
It's going to be really fascinating, isn't it? It's certainly an interesting time in politics. Claire, thank you very much indeed. That's Claire Purcell there joining us. She's a former Tory spad and now a councillor. Lots of you have been getting in touch. GBViews at gbnews.uk. Charles says, I believe that Boris has made more than a few mistakes. However, he's the most resilient politician in government, and I'm behind him in his drive to continue building Britain. Linda says Boris Johnson has got to go because he's lost all credibility. Christian Wakeford was elected by constituents as a Conservative MP, not a Labour MP, so therefore he must also give up a seat and stand as an independent. Trevor says that Wakeford is his MP and he's disgusted by his actions. Bury South did not vote for a party that was trying to keep us in the EU. If Wakeford has any integrity, he will call a by-election. I put that, of course, to Ellie Reeves from the Labour Party a little earlier, and she suggested that that's not going to be the case. And Mike says that Boris Johnson hasn't been the same since he had COVID. It's time to get off his back and let his friends in the Conservative Party trigger a vote of no confidence. If he goes, so be it. If he stays, let him get on with the job. GBViews at gbnews.uk. Got a couple of more minutes left on the programme. We'll get to some more of your views a little bit later. But let's kind of end up by getting an analysis of where we are now on this Wednesday afternoon, only halfway through the week. We're joined by, of course, Tom and Dan, both joining us from GB News and The Mail on Sunday. Tom Harwood and Dan Hodges, thank you very much for joining us. Tom, just first of all, bring us up to date, kind of where we are at this afternoon. I know you've been attending the briefings from both the Labour Party and the government.
That's right. The Labour Party clearly jubilant, trying to express that this is a new Labour Party that is welcoming to people who might have previously seen themselves as Conservatives, of course. Keir Starmer looking positively ecstatic in Prime Minister's questions as he welcomed Christian Wakeford to the Labour benches, saying that the Tories have changed and the Labour Party has changed. Whereas the Conservative Party very much on the defensive, although I would hasten to suggest that potentially the defection of Christian Wakeford has had a bit of a unifying effect amongst the backbench members of the Conservative Party. They see who the real enemy is, in effect, and it looks less than likely now that we'll reach that letter threshold this afternoon.
Is that what you're hearing, Dan, now, that the MPs are going to hold off until we get Sue Gray's reports?
Yes, I think that's where we're looking now. There was a prospect that we could have got the 54 by the end of today, but I think as we've just heard, I think the defection has pushed that back a little bit. But I still think we have to remember where we are this afternoon. I mean, what's happened today? I mean, we've had a dozen more letters go in to Graham Brady. We've had a Tory MP defect to the Labour Party, and we've had David Davis, one of the Tory grandees, stand up and say to the Prime Minister, in the name of God, go. So whilst Boris has had a little bit of breathing space, this has frankly been another disastrous day for him and for his leadership.
Is there a way through for this? Is it inevitably over? I mean, everyone else seems to think it is in terms of the guests. A lot of our viewers who still quite like him. Is there a way through for the Prime Minister?
I think what you have to step back and you have to think what drove Christian Wakeford to step across. What's driving Tory MPs who won seats because of Boris only 2 years ago to now call for him to go? What drove somebody like David Davis to call for him to go? It's not actually what's happening here, it's what's happening out in the country. We're all excitedly waiting for the Sue Gray report. They're not waiting for the Sue Gray report in the country. The country's made its mind up about what Boris did. They've looked at his apology, or what many see as a non-apology. They've looked at his attempt to explain what happened, and at the moment they're not buying it. It is conceivable there may be something in the wording about that Sue Gray comes up with. It's conceivable that Boris could respond to it next week in some way that changes perceptions. but I got to say, I mean, he's got himself out of a few scrapes in the past, but at the moment I can't see a route out from this one.
And there is a sense, though, Tom, irrespective of that, the bigger picture might not have changed, the fundamentals here, but he has kind of bought himself a bit more time, and that's kind of worked in their favour a little bit in the past.
It certainly has, although this does seem to be one of the criticisms of Boris Johnson's government, that they will try and find a fix for the situation they're in for this moment without thinking of the long-term consequences. And thinking that Sue Gray's report will be a massive get-out is not necessarily the wisest thing in the world, given that this will be a comprehensive review into all of these scandals. They will all bubble up again, even some that we may not have seen on the front pages of some newspapers. So this could be a very crucial moment. It will not be out of the woods, but certainly it will not be this week.
But in saying that, you and I were talking about this earlier on, weren't we? People point this out. It's a struggle to get to 54 votes. Are we guaranteed that he would lose a vote of confidence? John Major held on in the mid-90s. Theresa May held on not that long ago. Why do we... is the assumption here at this place that if it goes to a vote he will lose?
I don't think that is the assumption, but I think the assumption is that if it goes to a vote he will be incredibly weakened. And I think the problem with getting over that threshold and going to a no confidence vote is particularly that it's a secret ballot. You get a real view of where the dissent is in the party, and it's more likely than not, in my view, that you'd probably get a three-figure number of Conservative MPs saying that the Prime Minister should go. Now, it's an incredibly hard proposition to then lead a party, one-third of which is not behind the leader. We've seen how, for example, the proposals to abolish the licence fee or to have this new settlement being the last one for the licence fee have been watered down in a matter of hours because of the lack of authority, perhaps, emanating from Number 10. The Cabinet growing an authority, that really weakens a PM, and that's the response of the confidence vote.
Do you share that view, Dan?
Yeah, I mean, you articulated, obviously, I mean, I'm old enough to remember, Margaret Thatcher, she actually won a leadership contest and was gone, I think, within, 24, 48 hours. John Major won a leadership contest, went to an absolutely crushing general election defeat. Theresa May won a leadership contest and was gone the next year. So but the point at which those letters go in, I think at that point it is, if not the end, it is certainly the beginning of the end for Boris.
Okay, and just very finally, both of you, and relatively quickly if you can, one of Boris's strongest cards might be that there's no obvious successor. Who could take over?
I think it's at the moment it's looking basically like a two-horse race between Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss, possibly with Jeremy Hunt coming in, possibly Tom Tugendhat as something of a dark horse, but I think Rishi Sunak and Liz Truss are the tips. Hard to look beyond them at the moment.
Incredible though that obviously he's only been Chancellor for about 2 years now. It's quite a big jump up.
It is quite a big jump up, but he's not there yet. I mean, you're saying it's incredible about him. Look at where Liz Truss has come from. If we were standing here 12 months ago saying Liz Truss had a serious chance of being Prime Minister of the country, we'd have been dragged away. But we live in interesting times.
Tom?
I think the one name to also throw into the mix is Nadhim Zawahi. Of course, the former Vaccines Minister, now Education Secretary, was seen to be very successful.
For even less time.
He has been for even less time, but do you know the longest-serving member of the Cabinet currently, the person who's uninterrupted been in the Cabinet for the longest time?
Michael Gove.
Liz Truss.
Oh, no, Liz Truss.
Liz Truss. Michael Gove had his moment cast out by Theresa May when she became Prime Minister. So actually, sometimes just length of time in Cabinet isn't always that indicative of the likelihood of becoming Prime Minister.
And we know that Liz Truss, of course, will at least always be a defender of cheese, won't we? So, Dan Hodges, Tom Harwood, thank you very much indeed. And we're going to follow, of course, the twists and turns in this political story. It shows no sign of ending. Just when we think we've entered a lull, suddenly something else happens that changes the direction of this entirely. Just when we think that Boris Johnson might be facing that leadership challenge, it seems to ebb away a little bit. But I do think that main focus will come, that main moment, that decision time, particularly for lots of Conservative MPs, when Sue Gray's report comes out next week. Lots of you again still getting in touch. John says after seeing David Davis today at PMQs, it's obvious he's the new Prime Minister we need. Jan says it's not now the right time for Boris to go. MPs have submitted letters of no confidence, are more concerned about their jobs than the country needs. Boris has dropped the ball, but we don't need a change of leadership at the moment. David Davis is showing his true colours. And Jackie says Boris should go. He didn't get Brexit done and he's messed up Northern Ireland's stability. The tax burden is very high and the NHS waiting lists are also very long. If he had principles, he would go. Loads of range of views. That's what we want on GB News to get a certain flavour of what you are thinking at home. GB Views at gbnews.uk or tweet us at GB News. Well, that is it from me for today. Just remind you, Sajid Javid, the Health Secretary, is due to host a press conference in Downing Street on the rolling back of Plan B. That's at 5 o'clock. We'll have live coverage, of course, on GB News. Tom is back at 9:30 a.m. tomorrow morning. I'll be here at 3. But between now and then, we'll bring you up to date with all the latest developments on this fast-moving political story. Up next, it is Colin Brazier back in, lucky him, a very warm studio. Stay tuned for that. But first, let's bring you up to date with the weather from the Met Office.
Hello again. It's a cold day out there and feeling even colder in the wind that is coming from the north, but it is bringing clear spells alongside some wintry flurries. In the far northeast mainly, that wind could be directly from the Arctic right now behind a cold front which cleared earlier in the day. That's cleared the skies, but under the clear skies it will turn even colder overnight with a widespread frost. So some wintry stuff across northeast Scotland. Snow flurries coming through in that strong northerly wind. Some accumulations over the mountains, a centimetre perhaps at lower levels in places. Quite hit and miss given the showery nature of these flurries. Further south and elsewhere, widespread clear skies, and out of the wind, well, temperatures falling widely below freezing and as low as -5 Celsius for some sheltered spots in Scotland. So a freezing start to Thursday, but a bright start. Plenty of sunshine first thing. Temperatures slowly getting above 0 through the morning. However, for the northeast of Scotland, for eastern parts of England as well, 1 or 2 further sleet and snow showers coming through. They'll eventually die away. And then for most, it's a fine afternoon. Plenty of bright winter sunshine, but feeling cold, particularly in the wind in the north and the east. The wind eases and slowly changes direction during Thursday night, but we keep the clear skies, and under those clear skies, widely once again, frosty conditions forming. The most widespread and penetrating frost, this time in the south and the east, with temperatures in some rural parts below -4 or -5 degrees. The coldest night of the year so far in some southern parts of the country. But elsewhere, cloud is starting to filter in from the Atlantic, and those cloudier skies in the northwest will keep things frost-free. And that cloud will become a bit more widespread through the weekend, I think. So less sunshine, fewer frosts and fog patches at night, but staying cold.
Hello there, I'm Eamon.
And I'm Isabel.
And you're watching the GB News digital stream across the United Kingdom.
And around the world.
If you're here in the UK, you can also watch us on your TV screen. GB News is Freeview channel 236.
On Sky, we're channel 515.
626 on Virgin Media.
Just remember, you might need to retune your TV to watch the channel.
Yeah, and if you are doing that, find out more about retuning by going to gbnews.uk. Join my show Farrar, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday, and there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farrar.